Someone Like You by Sparkypasker. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 15. Tomura walked into the bar he called his home. Kuragiri, a genetically engineered, glorified babysitter with a body covered in fog, stood behind the counter, wiping a glass with a pure white towel. Tomura snatched a spare glass off the bar top and threw it at a wall. He used all 5 fingers to get the best leverage for a throw. The glass dissolved in midair and sprinkled over the ground. It was extremely unsatisfying. Kuragiri sighed and walked over to a closet behind the counter. He grabbed a broom and dustpan and went to clean up Tomura's mess. He could have used his quirk to clean up the mess, but he was trying to teach Tomura that using his quirk is not the answer to all his problems. Kuragiri would definitely never tell Sensei that, though. Sensei would prefer if Tomura's only problem-solving skill was to destroy whatever or whoever was working against him. "Sensei!" he yelled. "The analyst is a cheater!" "Why do you say that, Tomura?" A voice spoke softly from an antique television set. "I went to get information about All Might from him. First, he had the audacity to tell me no." "Really? Me? No?" Tomura yelled. "And then I went to grab him after he left work, and he just disappeared." He threw his hands into the air. "It's not possible! The back door was in an alley with a dead end, and I didn't give him enough time to get past me. He has to have a second quirk. It's the only explanation." Sensei hummed. "Well, it's not strictly impossible. After all, look at that Todoroki boy. The only thing is, when someone has more than one quirk, they're usually related. Endeavor's son's quirks are both temperature related. Since this boy has an analysis quirk, maybe the other one is speed? But it is extremely unlikely that one quirk would be mental while the other is physical." "Maybe he has a quirk like you?" Tomura asked. "Perhaps a weaker version due to us not knowing about it before now?" Quirks are genetic, meaning they run in families. Even the quirks of children who are seemingly different from their parents can trace the origins of their quirks, sometimes as far back as when quirks appeared. The child would have to have some sort of relation to me. My brother never had the opportunity to have children, and I was careful never to make that mistake. Ew! I did not need to hear that, Tomura interrupted. "Anyway," Sensei continued, "it's possible he is the descendant of a cousin or something like that. I didn't exactly keep track of the family during my takeover of Japan." "Then how did he just disappear?" "It could be that he is an anomaly. Perhaps the first of a truly different species of human. One whose gene makeup is distinctly different from those who came before him and breaks all of the rules we had thought we knew." "We need to find him." Tomura spoke with glee, as if he were a child anticipating the present his parents had promised him. "Patience, Tomura. You know where he works, so it will just be a matter of time. Tell me, what is his name? I will see if I can find his home address." Tomura stopped short. "I don't know." "You don't know?" Sensei asked in disbelief. "I don't know," Tomura confirmed. "How can you not know?" "Well, I didn't exactly look at his name tag." Tomura seethed. "What did he look like?" "I will go through the quirk registry to find someone who matches. Green hair, green eyes, short." "That's it?" "Yes, that's what he looked like. What else do you need?" "I guess that will have to suffice for now. Keep working on finding comrades, Tomura. I will find our elusive analyst." Izuku flew through the air, jumping from rooftop to rooftop. He was never going to take the train again. He had never felt more free than he did when he was flying through the sky. He wished he had a job further away from his apartment so that he didn't have to stop so soon. But he had gotten his bill from Hatsume Industries, so he needs to go pay it. His apartment was a couple floors up from the road, but still easy enough to get to. The roof door was usually locked, but easy enough to pick. But Izuku didn't feel like doing that tonight. Instead, he propelled himself down the side of the building. Once he got to his floor, he swung himself into the hallway. He put his key in the lock, opened the door, and walked inside. He noticed Inko sitting on the couch, watching a drama. Izuku walked past Inko, headed to his room. "Aren't you going to tell your mother you're home?" "I know I taught you better manners than that," she said, not taking her eyes off the television. Izuku sighed to himself. "I'm home," he called into the apartment. "That's better," she said, waving him away. Izuku walked down the hall and into his bedroom. The bill from Hatsume was sitting in the drawer of his desk. Izuku normally didn't worry about hiding anything in his room. Inko didn't care enough about him or what he was doing to snoop around. He hadn't opened the envelope yet, so Izuku took a pocket knife he found on the side of the road and cut it open. He looked at the numbers listed on the paper and winced. It was a lot. More than he had anticipated, but not more than he could afford. He logged into his bank account to send an electronic transfer. His heart skipped a beat. His account had nowhere near the amount of money he was supposed to have. Where did it go? He pulled up his transaction history. It said the money had been withdrawn by the account holder. But that wasn't possible. Izuku knew damn well he hadn't taken the money out. Izuku was starting to have a sneaking suspicion. He went to his account's profile. The profile confirmed what Izuku had hoped was wrong. Even though it said Izuku was the primary account holder, Inko had put herself on the account as well. Izuku quickly stood out of his chair and stormed into the living room. "What did you do with my money?" he asked, standing between Inko and the television. "What do you mean, your money?" "The money that was in my bank account, that was put there by my job. It was used to pay the bills." "I know exactly how much is supposed to be there. What you took out was far more than just paying my half of the bills." "Your half?" Ingo scoffed. "I think you misunderstand. You're paying all the bills now." "What?" Izuku asked in anger. "You need to prove that the job you're doing can support a family. How else can I make sure you will be ready when you're an adult? If you had run out of money, I would have paid whatever was extra from my account." "This is not what we agreed on. That money was for the equipment I need to be a crime fighter." "Are you still going on about that nonsense?" "It's not nonsense. I've been working my butt off for nearly a year to get that license." "Why do you even need to be a crime fighter anyway? Your job is even paying you decently. That is more than enough for someone like you." "I don't care about the money. I want to help people," Izuku yelled. "That is enough." Inko spat. "You are not going to be a crime fighter. End of discussion. I should never have allowed you to dream about it in the first place. Once you got your job, I should have put a stop to it then and there." "You can't stop me. I think you forgot. My name is on that bank account too. The money in that account is mine. If I don't want to allow you to buy something, then that's all there is to it." Izuku's eyes watered in frustration. He stormed back to his room. A few tears escaped and rolled down his cheeks. "Don't cry, you baby," Inko demanded. Izuku ignored her and went into his room, roughly shutting the door behind him. Izuku may not win the battle today, but he will be damned if he lets Inko win the war. He sat down on the floor in front of his door and cried out his frustrations. After a few minutes, he felt better. Izuku lifted himself off the floor and sat back down at his desk. Now that he had released his anger and frustrations, he was able to think a little more clearly. He had to save up the money again. That would mean pushing back his debut, and he had to find a way to make sure Inko didn't take the money again. If he used the bank account, Inko would just take it out. He needed some advice. Big Brother 23. Hey there, kid. Haven't seen you logged on in a while. Deku. Yeah, I have been working a lot. I work at a cafe and do a little bit of analysis on the side, so it's been busy. Freakazoid. I'm glad you were able to find a job. Deku. Thanks. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I got accepted to St. Damian's, but really, I ended up getting a job for nothing. Freakazoid. Awesome! You're going to be the best of us, kid. No soup for you. Jobs are never for nothing. Even if it's not something you enjoy, it still puts food on the table. Deku. Well, that's true. And it's not like I don't enjoy the job. In fact, I love analysis. But the only reason I got the job was so that I could save up money to be a crime fighter. Big Brother 23. You do know their reputation, right? Deku. Sigh. Yes, I am completely aware of the reputation. But I promise I am not planning on dying. I want to help people. CSI guy. We know you have always wanted to be a hero. We won't pretend we aren't worried, but we will do what we can to support you. Deku. Thank you. But unfortunately, everything was for nothing. No soup for you. Why? Why's that? Deku. My egg donor took all the money I had saved up. Big Brother 23. I know what that's like. It's one of the reasons I job hop. My parents used to try and take my money from me as well, but when they couldn't predict when I would get paid, they stopped. I'm positive they still watch my bank account, so I haven't stopped, and I probably won't until they die. No soup for you. As soon as I could move out of my parents' place, I did. Until I started my restaurant, I made sure all my jobs paid me in cash. If it didn't go into a bank account, then they couldn't take it. But it was a pain to open a bank account on my own. No one would allow me to open an account on my own. They all told me I had to have someone who had a quirk as a co-owner of the account. I had a girlfriend at the time that helped me open one, but once the restaurant failed, she cleaned out the account and left me. I'm back to getting paid in cash. Big Brother 23. Why do you still live with her? It sounded like you were making enough money that you would be able to afford to live on your own. Maybe see if your boss will pay you in cash instead. Deku. Because I'm a minor? No one will rent to me? I don't have a choice? Freakazoid. Did you get into high school early or something? Deku. No, I'm 15. Big Brother 23. Then, legally, you're an adult. You became one at 14. As long as you can find someone who will rent to someone quirkless, then you can leave. Deku. What? Why has no one ever told me this before? CSI guy. Well, most parents of quirkless kids actually kick them out once they turn 14. That's what happened to me. I have a feeling the other three here are actually oddballs. They had the chance to choose to leave that many of us don't get. Freakazoid. Yeah, I kind of figured you knew and were just being like me. My parents don't exactly like me, but as long as I don't make a mess and I'm quiet, they don't mind me staying there. But once I get a job, they want me gone. So I just pick up a cash-paying job here and there and hide the cash in my room so that they can't find it. I need to save up some money before I move out. Otherwise, I will be living on the street. I tried telling my parents that once, but they don't care. As soon as I get a paycheck, I'm gone. CSI guy. You know, you could always open an account in the Cayman Islands. Deku. Isn't that the place where sketchy people open bank accounts? CSI guy. Well, yes, but as long as you pay your taxes, it's legal. They have also become popular with the few quirkless people who have legitimate jobs. They have had a reputation for having strict, non discrimination banking and security policies. They also don't ask questions to begin with, so it makes it easy to make an account. Izuku double checked the laws pertaining to offshore banking, and sure enough, they were legal as long as they were not hidden and he paid his taxes. But more than that, this was probably going to be the only way Izuku is going to get out from underneath Inko's thumb. He is going to have to make his own account and move out. Making an account with a Cayman Island bank was easy enough. Izuku just went online, filled out an application, which was immediately accepted, and electronically transferred as much money as he was allowed. That basically just left Inko with the minimum amount in order to keep the account active. From the sounds of it, he wouldn't be able to close the account even if he wanted to, which he does, but that is beside the point. The next thing Izuku did was put a safeguard on his Cayman account. He never wanted someone to take money out of his account without him knowing again. He made his account so that if any money were to be taken out, it had to be approved by Izuku first. He would get a notification detailing how much was being withdrawn and where it was being transferred. Izuku would then have to approve it before the money could move. He was sure it would probably get annoying after a while, but he would prefer to be annoyed than not know where his money was going. Once his new account was set up, he started looking for apartments. He filled out application after application, circling out from his current residence. He wasn't having much luck. Within seconds of submitting an application, he would receive a denial. Izuku assumed it was due to his quirklessness because he was required to disclose it, but each one said it was due to lack of open units. It was obviously a lie. Why would they advertise an opening when there were no openings? Unfortunately, there was nothing Izuku could do about it. Izuku went out a little further with the same results. When he checked the address of his next application, he realized it would put him firmly in the middle of southern Mustafa. Izuku was hesitant to apply. That part of the city had the highest crime rate. But it was either live there or live with Inko, and Izuku wasn't really seeing too much of a difference, to be completely honest. Before he could talk himself out of it, he sent in his application. This one took longer to come back. When he didn't receive an automatic denial, he started looking for more openings in neighboring cities. The options were simply too far away, though. Izuku would have to take a train into town, and the ride would be an hour at a minimum. And that was assuming he could get accepted in any apartments to begin with. After about 30 minutes, Izuku received word on his application from the unit in southern Mustafa. To Izuku's disbelief, it was accepted. He had to pay a deposit and first month's rent. The apartment would be available in a week. He wasn't having any luck anywhere else, so he went ahead and electronically transferred the money to the account given in the notice. Izuku received a notification on his phone to accept the transfer, which he gladly did. He was happy to actually be able to test that feature and was glad it worked. Getting a place of his own felt freeing. Unfortunately, it took nearly all the money he had left, and he had to wait a week before he could move in. He would still have to push back his debut until he had the money saved up again. Izuku figured he should send a message to Hatsume. Midoriya. Hey, my egg donor stole all my money, so I can't pay for my equipment. Do you guys have a payment plan, or can you store my equipment until I can get the money? Hatsume. Please hold a moment. Izuku was confused. Did she not believe that was something a parent would do? Hatsume. I have a proposition for you. Midoriya. What's that? Hatsume. Would you be interested in a job? Izuku looked at his phone. Was he really going to get what was essentially his third job? He hadn't originally considered working off his debt, but he supposed he could do that. But did he physically have enough time to do so? Probably. His other two jobs are basically done at the same time. Midoriya, what kind of job? If it was going to be something extremely time consuming, he would probably not be able to and would need to figure something else out. Hatsume, I want you to be my product tester? You test my babies and I give you my babies for free. Midoriya, yes, I would definitely be interested. Hatsume, great! I have never had a product tester of my own. I promise I won't blow you up too much. Izuku laughed to himself, then stopped short. He just remembered that may not have been a joke. He did walk in on her exploding something once, and that laugh haunted his dreams for a few days afterwards. He probably should have thought it over a little more before agreeing. Chapter 16. For the first time in weeks, Izuku walked into the gym at his normal time. Kimura was sitting at the front desk for once. Probably didn't have anything to talk about this morning, or had busy work to do. Izuku would have actually liked the distraction this morning. Now that he had his equipment, he just needed to get his license. He was planning on going to the police station this morning, but he was too nervous. That was partly the reason why he was at the gym in the first place. The other part was because he needed to get back into the habit of going. After lifting weights for about an hour, Izuku finished up his exercise with a 30-minute run. He had been working for a long time to increase the amount of time he could continuously sprint. 30 minutes was his comfortable time right now. He could go longer, but since he was just getting back into the swing of things and still had to go to the police station, he didn't want to get too out of breath. About 15 minutes after Izuku started his workout, the purple-haired guy from before had walked in the door and started out on the elliptical to warm up. Every time Izuku changed machines, so did he. Izuku caught him staring a few times. It looked like he wanted to say something, but he never so much as took one step towards Izuku. So Izuku decided he was just going to go about his business until the guy decided to say whatever it was he wanted to say. Izuku finished his run without any interruption and went into the locker room. Izuku heard the door open as he was starting a shower. He finished washing up, dried off, then donned his underwear before leaving his stall. He had a purple-haired, baggy-eyed visitor waiting for him when he got to his locker, but the guy still never said anything. He just stood there and watched as Izuku got dressed. He would have accused the guy of being a pervert if it wasn't for the fact that he wasn't really looking at anything. He was staring straight ahead with a faraway look in his eyes. Izuku figured he was trying to figure out how he was going to start whatever it was he wanted to say. Izuku was tying up his shoes when he finally decided to say something. "Are you really quirkless?" he asked. Izuku paused for a second. Kimura said he was supposed to tell him if anyone talked about Izuku's quirk, or lack thereof, but there was something in the question. It didn't sound accusatory or derogatory. It sounded like the answer to the question would determine if the purple-haired youth continued into the light or fell into despair. "Yes," Izuku answered honestly. "How did you do it?" the young man asked. "Do what?" "How did you get to look like you do?" Izuku tilted his head to the side and glanced at himself in one of the few full-length mirrors that were hanging on the walls of the locker room. He hadn't really paid attention to his appearance, so he's not sure how much he had changed, but he did see that he looked lean. He also had defined muscles, but were not large like what you would see on a weightlifter. Izuku felt like maybe he should have been offended because it was a similar question to what Kimura asked all those weeks ago, but it didn't feel the same. If anything, it almost seemed like the question was asked out of desperation, as if he was begging Izuku to tell him that he could do it too, to tell him how it was done in the first place. Although Izuku had to admit he didn't really see what the guy was talking about. He didn't exactly look impressive, but Izuku was not the type of person to purposefully break someone down. That made Izuku wonder. The young man was probably about his age. Based on experience, Izuku would guess the man wants to be a hero. There was almost no one his age who didn't want to be one, but what would make him believe he couldn't be one? Also, based on experience, it would have to be quirk-related, but he wasn't quirkless. Otherwise, he would have never asked Izuku if he was. Izuku hadn't ever met anyone else who was quirkless, but he imagined that if he did, he would have come out and said something like, "I'm quirkless too." That left the possibility that his quirk was undesirable. Emitter and transformative quirks usually left some sort of physical sign, like the guy who came into the cafe. His quirk dehydrated objects, so it caused his skin to dry out. This guy looked fairly normal, obviously no mutation quirk or any mutation whatsoever. There were no birthmarks or unusual designs on the skin. The most unusual things about him were his hair that stood on end and the bags under his eyes. Izuku could tell his hair stood up on its own. The little hairs around the edges of his forehead, even damp with sweat, were not held down. The only way to get the color under the eyes that dark was with severe and chronic insomnia. All quirks affect their users in some way. Inko, for example, sometimes waves her hands in the air even when not actually using her quirk. These observations pointed to him having a mental quirk. Those were incredibly interesting. Although they were considered emitter types, they really should be in a league of their own. They have very subtle indicators. This young man's hair could have easily been gelled, and the insomnia could be genetic, although Izuku is certain that's not actually the case. Gel would normally wash out with sweat, and if the insomnia were genetic, the age of onset wouldn't normally be that young. Mental quirks fell largely into two categories: those who affect the user and those who affect others. And the two types are treated differently by society. The first were treated like prodigies. The quirks normally made people smarter or have a unique skill that makes them incredibly helpful to society. This was where Izuku fell. People at the cafe thought he had a quirk that basically made him smarter. Boy, would they be in disbelief if the truth ever came out. The second category was not treated as well. If this person was using this gym and asking those kinds of questions, he probably fell into this category. Izuku felt a pebble sink into his stomach, just enough to cause a bit of nausea. Why? Because he knew mental quirks that affected others were almost always considered villainous, which was absolutely ridiculous. There was no such thing as heroic or villainous quirks, but this, evidently, was only something that someone quirkless could see. "I worked hard," Izuku answered. Well, that sounded fake, like what rich people who get all their money from their parents say when they asked how they got so rich. "And I actually mean that." Izuku felt like he had to add on. "It took me nearly a year to get where I am today. I learned a lot from online forums and videos, and I was lucky enough to find people who were willing to help me." Man scrunched up his face. "I could help you," Izuku offered. "I can get you in touch with a couple of friends of mine." Izuku took his phone out of his pocket and pulled up Ojiro's contact. Izuku hadn't had a phone for long, but he was pretty sure it was poor etiquette to give out someone's phone number without asking first, so he sent a message asking just that. "I go to a dojo run by my friend's uncle. If they accept someone quirkless, I'm sure they would take in someone with a, quote, villainous mental quirk," Izuku said offhandedly. Even if you could clearly hear the sarcasm in the last part of Izuku's statement, the purple guy still went rigid and glared at Izuku. "How could you possibly know that?" he sneered. "It's quirk analysis," Izuku said casually. Something Izuku had only learned recently is that when he tells someone he's quirkless and they treat it like it's no big deal, it made Izuku feel normal, like he wasn't actually a freak of nature. He had never tried to do the same thing on someone else, so he wasn't sure if that was the response unique to him or if others felt the same way. "It's what I do." Well, even if the response isn't universal, it also seemed to work for the young man. The tension in his shoulders relaxed and the glare softened, but he still looked at Izuku with suspicion. Ojiro texted Izuku back almost immediately, giving Izuku the okay to give out his number. He also mentioned he would meet up with him sometime before school starts. "My friend said it was okay for me to give you their number. Give me your phone. I will put my number in and share the contact." The phone was handed over reluctantly. Izuku typed his number into the new text message box and sent himself a message, then responded to the message on his own phone with Ojiro's contact. "If it's okay with you, I want to save your contact information in my phone. Maybe we can text every once in a while?" Izuku asked. "Sure, I guess." The name's Shinso Hitoshi. "I'm Midori Izuku." Izuku stood in front of the police station, working up the nerve to go inside. What if something had changed and there was no such thing as crime fighting anymore? What if they just decided that they were not going to allow him to do it? No, he couldn't think that way. He had worked so hard for so long. No one had thought getting rid of crime fighting as something important for decades. So there is no way they would have considered it any time in the last year. It was still a possibility. He could still do it. Izuku stepped through the door. He walked up to the front desk. "I'm here to apply for a crime fighting license," he told the officer working the desk. They looked up at Izuku with annoyance, but bent down, opened what sounded like a filing cabinet, and handed Izuku a piece of paper. Izuku took a pen from the cup sitting on the desk and began to fill out the form. As far as applications went, this one had almost nothing to it. It literally just asked him for his name, birthday, phone number, and address. Izuku debated on which address to put down, his new one or his current one. In the end, he decided to put down his current address. If they needed to get in touch with him after he moved, he could just update it then. Other than the basic information, they only needed him to mark a box confirming he was quirkless and his signature stating he was aware of the risks and relieving the city of any liability in the case of his death. He had halfway expected to need something more than that, like a test showing, the law or a physical assessment or something. But nope, that was it. Izuku handed the form back to the police officer. They looked over the form, then picked up a camera. He pointed at a blank wall. Izuku backed up to the wall and stood facing the officer. They took a picture with the camera, then went back to their computer and pushed a few buttons. In about 30 seconds, a license was being spat out of the printer. He handed the warm license to Izuku, then sat back down at his desk and went back to writing up whatever report he was working on. Izuku looked at the license. His face stared back up at him. Unlike heroes, crime fighters didn't have code names. At least not officially, it seemed. Instead, he had an ID number, CF2357. "Who do I contact when I arrest a villain?" Izuku asked the officer. The officer scoffed, as if you would actually be able to catch anyone without a quirk. "Who do I contact when I arrest a villain?" Izuku repeated. The officer sighed and opened up a drawer behind him. He pulled a pamphlet out and threw it across the desk. It slid right off, where Izuku quickly caught it. Izuku opened it and found a list of phone numbers, one for each precinct in the city. "You can call whichever's closest, but don't even bother. It's not as if any of them will waste their time to come pick the villain up anyway. How is arresting a villain a waste of their time? It's literally their job. Look, kid, no judge is going to touch a case brought in by someone quirkless. If you catch any villains, they're just going to be your buddies, trying to help make you look good. It's a waste of time to try and convict someone who didn't actually commit a crime. Not to mention the fact that the HPSC made an amendment to that little loophole you are trying to use. What amendment? You have to have sufficient evidence to prosecute at the time of arrest. There is no way someone like you would be able to get that. Izuku felt a righteous anger form in his gut. We will see about that. He walked out of the station, phone in hand. He needed to call Hatsume. It was time to make some renovations to his costume. The officer took Izuku's form to the back office. He knocked on the detective's office door. I have a crime fighter form for you to file, he said. Detective Tsukashi looked up from the case he was working on. A crime fighter form? Why didn't you stop them? You know what usually happens. What's the point? I gave him the pamphlet. I did my job. If the kid wants to die, then just let him die. It's better for the gene pool. The officer walked away, back to his desk. What the officer said struck a chord within Tsukashi. It wasn't right. No police officer should say something like that. Unfortunately, he didn't have the power to do anything, but he knew who did. Tsukashi picked up his phone and pushed speed dial number 5. The phone rang a few times before being suddenly cut off. Tsukashi, to what do I owe the pleasure of speaking with you today? Did you finally catch the bank robber? Hello, Chief. No, not yet. We're still trying to corner them in an area without any electricity. I can see how that would be difficult to accomplish. Yes, well, I'm actually calling today on a personal problem. Oh, what seems to be the problem? We had someone quirkless come in and fill out a crime fighter application. The officer working the front desk didn't even try to stop them. You know what usually ends up happening? And then he comes to me and said, we should just let the kid die. That is not the kind of attitude that should be allowed in a police officer. Did he say anything like that to the applicant? Well, I don't know for sure, but I don't believe so. And did he give the applicant the pamphlet? He said he did. Then there is nothing I can do. We can't punish someone for their personal opinions, not unless they said it to a civilian and the civilian complains. Everyone has their own opinions, whether they are right or wrong. If we fired every police officer that wasn't a saint, we wouldn't have any police officers. I guess, Tsukashi said, then hung up the phone. He was not at all satisfied. Even if the police officer couldn't be fired, he believed they should have some sort of repercussion to show that type of thinking was not acceptable. He had always believed Chief was like him, someone who believed everyone was deserving of justice. That's the entire reason he became a police officer in the first place, to help people who were not able to help themselves. But Tsukashi had a sneaking suspicion the chief was less like him and more like the officer working the front desk, just less forward about it. Tsukashi picked up the folder with the applicant's form. What's done is done. The least he could do is make up for his coworker's lack of sympathy, is to make sure the kid is at least looked out for when he's on the street. Tsukashi opens the file and stares down into the eyes of the analyst. His jaw dropped. There was no way that's who the applicant is. There is no way he was quirkless. It's well known that he has an analysis quirk. Or is it? None of the advertisements, nor did the analyst himself ever mention actually using a quirk. Tsukashi opened up the quirk registry and scoured it. He needed a double check. His disbelief turned to wonder. He couldn't find him anywhere in it. He was actually just that smart. It was incredible. Horror grew in his rib cage. Sukashi quickly opened up a drawer of his filing cabinet and began looking for the paperwork for confidential informants. He was very much aware of how the quirkless population was thought of by the general public and the justice system. When they find and arrest the bank robber, he will have to turn all his evidence over to a judge, and the defending attorney will have unlimited access to it. The whole case could get dismissed if it was discovered the break in the case came from someone quirkless, let alone someone who was quirkless and unproven. If the quirkless person had a track record of successful convictions, it could be argued by the prosecutor that the information came from a reliable source. Right now, Midoriya doesn't have that as a quirkless person. He has a track record as someone with an analysis quirk, but as soon as it gets out that he's quirkless, that track record goes down the drain. Until he had that back again, Sukashi had to protect him any way he could. Now that he knew who the applicant was, he had no doubt Midoriya would succeed as a crime fighter. He had the smarts, that's for sure. That wouldn't stop Sukashi from looking out for him, though. Sukashi started filling out the paperwork. He had to make Midoriya a confidential informant. It would prevent him from being able to tell people who he got the information from, and if they caught the robber before Midoriya had a proven track record, it would prevent either lawyer from being able to call him as a witness. Because if someone found him and discovered he had, quote, interfered with an official investigation that resulted in someone getting it put into Tartarus, there is no doubt in Sukashi's mind that he would be hunted and killed. He just didn't know who would get to him first, the heroes or the villains. End of chapter.